She built a cabin by herself, until a widowed cowboy walked into her life. Far from the shum of the town, beyond the dusty roads and scattered ranches, there was a quiet valley where very few people ever went. The land there was wide and open, with tall grass that moved gently in the wind like waves in the sea. In the middle of that lonely place, a woman named Eliza was building a cabin all by herself. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, Eliza was already awake. She tied her hair back, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Her hands were rough from labor, her skin warm from the sun, but she never complained. She lifted heavy logs, cut wood, and hammered nails with a steady rhythm. The sound of her tools echoed across the empty land, the only sign that someone lived there. People from the nearby town had once been curious about her. When she first arrived months ago, they watched her quietly buy supplies, wood, tools, simple food, and then leave without saying much. Some tried to talk to her, but Eliza always kept her answers short. She was polite, but distant. Why would a woman live out there alone? They would whisper among themselves. But Eliza never returned to answer their questions. She chose the valley because it was quiet, because no one would ask too much, because out there she could breathe. Back in the valley, she paused for a moment, wiping sweat from her forehead as she looked at the cabin. It wasn't perfect, but it was strong. The walls were almost finished and the roof was halfway done. It had taken her weeks of hard work, but she didn't mind. Each piece of wood she placed felt like she was building something more than just a house. She was building distance, from her past, from people, from memories she didn't want to face. The wind picked up slightly, brushing against her face. For a second, she closed her eyes and listened. There were no voices, no noise, no reminders, just the soft sound of nature. That was the way she liked it. Eliza picked up her hammer again and continued working. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The heat grew stronger, but she didn't slow down. She had learned long ago that staying busy made things easier. When her hands were working, her mind stayed quiet. Just as she was about to lift another wooden beam, something caught her attention. At first, it was just a small movement far in the distance. Eliza straightened slightly, narrowing her eyes. She wasn't used to seeing anything move out there. The valley was usually empty, but this time, she saw it clearly. A figure on horseback. The rider was still far away, but there was no doubt. Someone was coming. Her grip tightened around the hammer. She didn't panic, but she became alert. No one came to this place without a reason. For a moment, she considered going inside what little of the cabin was finished, but she didn't move. Instead, she stood her ground, watching carefully. The horse moved slowly, its steps calm and steady. The rider didn't rush, didn't wave, didn't call out. He simply kept coming forward, as if he already knew where he was going. Eliza felt a strange mix of thoughts. Part of her wanted to ignore him. Another part wondered why he was here. She hadn't come all this way to meet people. As the figure grew closer, she could see more clearly now. It was a man, dressed like a cowboy. His hat shaded his face, and his shoulders looked slightly tired, as if he had been traveling for a long time. Still, he didn't look dangerous. But Eliza had learned not to trust first impressions. She set the hammer down slowly, but kept it within reach. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man as he finally reached the edge of her land. The horse came to a stop a short distance away. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The wind passed between them, carrying silence. Eliza stood straight, her expression calm but guarded. The man gently removed his hat, revealing a face that looked older than his years, not because of age, but because of experience. His eyes were quiet, almost heavy, but there was no anger in them. "Evenin'," he said simply. His voice was low and respectful. Eliza didn't respond right away. She studied him, trying to understand why he was here. People didn't just appear in her world anymore. Finally, she spoke. "You're a long way from town." The man gave a small nod, as if he expected that answer. "So are you," he replied. There was no challenge in his voice, just a simple truth. Eliza crossed her arms slightly, still watching him. The quiet valley no longer felt as empty as it once did. And for the first time in a long while, Eliza realized something had changed. Someone had found her. The wind moved softly between them, carrying dust across the dry ground. Eliza stood still, her eyes fixed on the stranger. She was not afraid, but she was careful. She had learned that being careful kept her safe. The man rested one hand lightly on the saddle of his horse. He did not move closer. It was clear he did not want to make her uncomfortable. "My name is Daniel Hayes," he said after a moment. His voice was calm, steady, and simple. Eliza did not answer right away. She had not given her name to anyone in a long time. Names made things feel personal, and she was not sure she wanted that. Still, something about the man felt different. He was not loud, he was not demanding. He did not act like he owned the space. "Eliza," she finally said. Daniel gave a small nod, as if that was enough. Another silence followed, but it was not tense. It was just quiet. "I didn't mean to disturb you," Daniel said. "I've been riding for a while. Saw your cabin from a distance." Eliza glanced back at her half-built home, then back at him. "It's not finished yet," she said. "Looks strong," Daniel replied. She did not smile, but she noticed his words. Most people would have said it looked small or simple. He saw something else. Daniel gently patted his horse. "Mind if I stop here for a bit? Just to rest the horse." Eliza hesitated. She was not used to sharing her space. This land, this silence, it all belonged to her now. But she also knew the land was open. No one truly owned the valley. "You can stay for a short while," she said. "Then you move on." Daniel nodded. "Fair enough." He slowly stepped down from his horse, careful not to make sudden movements. He tied the reins loosely to a wooden post nearby. His actions were calm, almost thoughtful. Eliza watched everything. He didn't act like someone who wanted to take over. He acted like someone who didn't want to cause trouble. For a while, they stayed in silence again. Eliza picked up her hammer and returned to her work. She kept an eye on him, but she didn't stop what she was doing. If he stayed, he would stay on her terms. Daniel, on the other hand, did not sit idle. After looking around for a moment, he noticed a loose wooden plank near the side of the cabin. Without asking, he walked over and adjusted it carefully, making sure it fit better. Eliza noticed. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied simply. "Just passing time." She said nothing more, but she did not stop him. The hours passed slowly. The sun began to lower in the sky and the air became cooler. Daniel worked quietly, fixing small things here and there. He did not take over, and he did not give instructions. He just helped where he could. That was something Eliza was not used to. Most people either told her what to do or asked too many questions. Daniel did neither. After a while, Eliza placed her hammer down again. "You always walk into places and start fixing things?" she asked, her tone calm but curious. Daniel looked at her, a faint smile on his face. "Only when I see something that can be made better," he said. Eliza raised an eyebrow slightly. "And what if it doesn't need fixing?" Daniel shrugged gently. "Then I leave it alone." His answer was simple, but it stayed in her mind. The sky turned orange as the sun began to set. Shadows stretched across the ground and the valley grew quiet again. Daniel walked back to his horse but didn't untie it. "I'll head out soon," he said. Eliza nodded, though she didn't say anything. For some reason, the thought of him leaving felt noticeable. She didn't understand why. Before leaving, Daniel paused and looked back at the cabin. "You've done a lot here," he said. "Not easy work." Eliza crossed her arms lightly. "I didn't come out here for easy." Daniel gave a small nod, as if he respected that. "I can tell," he said. There was another pause. The kind that feels like something more could be said, but isn't. Then Daniel spoke again. "I might pass through this way again," he said. "If that's all right." Eliza looked at him carefully. She should have said no. That would have been the easier answer. But instead, she said, "This land's open." It wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't a rejection either. Daniel seemed to understand that. He placed his hat back on his head and untied his horse. With a gentle movement, he climbed onto the saddle. "Take care, Eliza," he said. She gave a small nod. "You too." And just like that, he turned and rode away, disappearing slowly into the wide valley. Eliza stood there, watching until he was gone. The silence returned. But it didn't feel exactly the same as before. For the first time in months, Eliza realized something strange. The quiet no longer felt complete, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or something she should be careful about. The next morning, Eliza woke up before sunrise, just like always. The air was cool and the valley was quiet again. For a moment, everything felt normal. She stepped outside, looked around, and saw nothing but open land. Daniel was gone. She told herself that was how it should be. Still, as she picked up her tools and began working on the roof, she found her thoughts drifting. She remembered how quietly he worked, how he didn't ask questions, how he didn't try to change anything. It had been different. Eliza shook her head slightly, trying to push the thoughts away. She had come here to be alone. One stranger passing through didn't change that. Days passed. The cabin slowly came closer to being finished. The walls were strong, the roof nearly complete, and the inside had begun to feel like a real home. Eliza worked hard, keeping herself busy from morning to evening. But sometimes, without meaning to, she would glance toward the same direction where Daniel had ridden away. Each time, the valley answered with silence. On the fourth day, just as the sun was beginning to lower, Eliza heard something again. Hoofbeats. Her body went still. She turned slowly, already knowing who it might be. And there he was. Daniel rode into view, just like before. Calm, steady, unhurried. This time, however, he stopped a little farther away, as if giving her space to decide. Eliza didn't speak at first. Neither did he. After a moment, Daniel removed his hat slightly. Evenin'. Eliza crossed her arms, but there was no sharpness in her expression. You came back, she said. Daniel nodded once. Told you I might. She studied him for a second, then glanced back at her cabin. You passing through again? She asked. Something like that, he replied. There was a small pause. You can rest your horse, Eliza said finally. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Daniel gave a quiet, thank you, and stepped down from his horse. Just like before, he moved slowly, respectfully. He tied the horse nearby and looked around, noticing the progress she had made. You've been busy, he said. Eliza gave a small shrug. Work doesn't stop. Daniel nodded, understanding more than she said. Without asking, he walked over and picked up a piece of wood that needed adjusting. He began working on it, steady and focused. Eliza didn't stop him this time. In fact, she found herself working beside him. For a while, they said nothing. Just the sound of tools, the soft wind, and the quiet rhythm of shared work. It felt natural. As the sun began to set, the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. Eliza sat down on a wooden step outside the cabin, wiping her hands on a cloth. Daniel sat a short distance away, leaning back slightly, looking at the open land. You always travel alone? Eliza asked suddenly. Daniel didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the horizon. Mostly, he said after a moment. There was something in his voice, something heavier than before, Eliza noticed. Mostly? She repeated. Daniel let out a slow breath. I wasn't always alone, he said quietly. The words hung in the air. Eliza didn't interrupt. After a moment, Daniel continued. I had a wife, he said. We used to live not too far from here. Eliza's expression softened, just a little. What happened? She asked. Daniel paused, as if choosing his words carefully. She passed away, he said simply. There was no long explanation, no details, just those words. But they were enough. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, but full of meaning. Eliza looked down at her hands. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Daniel nodded once. It's been a while. But you didn't stay? She asked. Daniel shook his head slightly. Didn't feel right staying in the same place, he said. Everything there reminded me of what I lost. Eliza understood that feeling more than she expected. She stared out at the valley, her voice softer now. Sometimes staying is harder than leaving, she said. Daniel glanced at her, noticing the change in her tone. You came out here for the same reason? He asked. Eliza didn't answer right away. The wind moved gently around them. I didn't come here for peace, she said slowly. I came because I didn't want to explain myself anymore. Daniel didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. There was something in her voice that told him enough. They sat there in silence again, but this time it didn't feel distant. It felt shared. Two people, both carrying things they didn't talk about, sitting under the same open sky. After a while, Daniel stood up and brushed the dust from his hands. I should get going, he said. Eliza looked up at him. She expected that, but something inside her felt different now. Stay a little longer, she said, before she could stop herself. The words surprised even her. Daniel paused. He looked at her carefully, as if making sure he heard correctly. Eliza didn't repeat herself. She simply looked away, toward the cabin. There's still work to do, she added quietly. A small smile appeared on Daniel's face. All right, he said. And just like that, something changed again. Not in a loud or sudden way, but in a quiet, steady way. Just like everything else between them. For the first time, Eliza wasn't just building a cabin. She was allowing someone to stay. The morning sun rose gently over the valley, spreading soft light across the land. For the first time in many months, Eliza was not the only one awake before sunrise. Daniel was already outside, fixing a loose wooden beam near the side of the cabin. His movements were quiet and careful, just like always. He worked as if he had been there for a long time, not just a few days. Eliza stepped out of the cabin and paused for a moment. She watched him. There was something strange about seeing another person in her space every morning. At first, it had felt uncomfortable. Now it felt normal. Not completely, but enough. "You don't have to wake up that early," she said. Daniel glanced over his shoulder and gave a small smile. "Habit," he replied. "Hard to break." Eliza nodded slightly. She understood that. Some habits stayed with you, no matter where you went. She walked over and picked up her tools, joining him without saying anything more. They worked side by side, their movements steady and quiet. There was no need for many words. They had found a rhythm together. Days passed. The cabin was finally complete. The roof was strong, the walls were smooth, and the door stood firm in its place. Inside, it was simple but warm. A table, 2 chairs, a small bed, and a place for fire. It was not a big home, but it was enough. Eliza stood outside, looking at it. For a long time, this cabin had been her only goal. Every piece of wood, every nail, every long day of work had led to this moment. And now it was done. Daniel stepped beside her, his hands resting loosely at his sides. "You built something good here," he said. Eliza looked at the cabin, then slowly shook her head. "I built it," she said, "but it didn't stay mine alone." Daniel didn't answer right away. He understood what she meant. A soft wind moved through the valley, carrying the quiet sounds of the land. It felt peaceful, but not empty. Not anymore. Eliza turned and walked toward the door. She pushed it open and stepped inside. Daniel followed after a moment. The inside of the cabin felt different now that it was finished. It no longer felt like a work site. It felt like a place to stay, a place to live. Eliza ran her hand lightly across the wooden table. "For a while, I thought this place would be enough," she said. Daniel leaned gently against the wall, listening. "It was quiet," she continued. "Simple. No questions, no people." She paused, then looked at him. "But quiet doesn't always mean complete." Daniel lowered his gaze slightly, thinking about her words. "I know what you mean," he said softly. They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Eliza stepped outside again. Daniel followed. The open land stretched in every direction, just like before. Nothing about the valley had changed, but something inside both of them had. Daniel walked over to his horse. He gently untied the reins and rested his hand on the saddle. His movements were slow, thoughtful. Eliza watched him. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel gave a small nod. "I've been here longer than I planned," he said. "Didn't want to overstay." Eliza felt a quiet pause settle between them. This was the moment she had been expecting. But now that it was here, it didn't feel as simple as she thought it would. "You don't have to go," she said. The words came out steady, but they carried meaning. Daniel looked at her, surprised, but not completely. "You sure about that?" he asked. Eliza crossed her arms lightly, but her expression was calm. "There's always more work to do," she said. "Fences, repairs, things like that." Daniel smiled faintly. "That all?" he asked. Eliza looked away for a second, then back at him. "No," she said quietly. "Not all." There was no need to explain further. Daniel understood. He looked out at the valley again, the same wide land he had traveled through so many times. For years he had kept moving, never staying in one place too long. But this place felt different. Not because of the land. Because of her. He turned back to Eliza. "I can stay a while," he said. Eliza nodded once. "That's fine," she replied. But there was a small, quiet smile on her face, the kind she hadn't shown in a long time. Daniel tied his horse again, this time without hesitation. Not like before, when he was only stopping for a short rest. This time, he was staying. The wind moved gently through the valley, brushing against the cabin walls. The sun climbed higher in the sky, bringing warmth to the land. Eliza picked up her tools again, though there wasn't much left to build. Daniel walked over and joined her anyway. "Where do we start?" he asked. Eliza looked around, thinking for a moment. Then she pointed toward the open land. "Out there," she said. It wasn't just about building fences or fixing wood. It was about building something new, something neither of them had planned. Side by side, they walked forward. The cabin stood behind them, strong, quiet, and complete. But their story was just beginning, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt the need to walk away.